Happy Thursday for the Tactile Media Alliance Tactile Talks. I'm Abby Stengel, assistant professor in industrial design at Georgia Tech. Today's my birthday, so I'm excited because actually being here with all of you is an awesome gift. This is a dream to have this community growing and expanding. And today's session, I think, is a tribute to kind of the potential and the power that we have as a community in terms of building our network and working as an international community. I am pleased to reintroduce Doreen Intervelt, who is a collaborator in supporting the envisioning of what the Tactile Media Alliance could be, and suggested today's session as a concept for how we can really motivate and create working groups around critical topics related to tactile media accessibility. And so at the end of the talk, we'll leave some time to chat about next steps and how we can kind of further this initiative around internationalization and making sure that we're crossing boundaries in that way. So Doreen, I'll hand it off to you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Abby. Well, for those who can see, this is Doreen. Welcome, all of you. The topic of this meeting is ending the tactile book famine, enhancing the availability, affordability, and findability of high-quality tactile images and books. And so this evening, for some of us this afternoon, is a direct follow-up of the Tactile Reading Conference, the table talk under the same name that Hoëlle gave. I don't think I have to say very much about the theme and the objectives of this talk. There are wonderful tactile images and tactile image books, but it still is very difficult for visually impaired people and all those around them to lay their hands on them, to actually get them and read them. This goes for children, this goes for adults, for education, and for leisure. I'm very happy that I have three very expert and experienced speakers for you tonight. Enrica Polato will start. She is the expert in tactile illustrated books for visually impaired children. And then we'll listen to Julian Nauta. He's my successor. He's the product manager of Braille and Tactile Images at Dedicon, the National Resource Center in the Netherlands. And the last speaker will be Hoëlle Corvest. And actually, she kind of is my teacher. So I'm very happy to have them. Thank you all three of you. And I hope that this trans-cultural, trans-age, trans-situation, trans-different perspectives approach will inspire all to find ways to make more good tactile images and books available. And as Abby said, I hope we'll have a working group on this topic. So the presenters will talk back to back. That means one after the other. I will introduce each of them briefly. So please notate your questions for the question and answer session we will have after the talks. So they all have very little time to present, so I will not talk much more. A few words on Enrica. She is working at the University of Bologna. She is collaborating with the Robert Holman Foundation in Italy, and she gave super good workshop in Padua at ICVI in 2025. There she was sharing her ideas on how to make sure children get the tactile image books actually reach the hands of the children that they are made for. So though she only has 10 minutes now, she will introduce the term editability to you. And so please, Enrica, the floor, or rather the screen, is yours.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the Tactile Media Alliance for giving me the opportunity to give this presentation. My name is Enrica Polato. I'm a researcher at the University of Bologna, and I have been working with the Robert Holman Foundation for several years. This foundation is a private, non-profit organization of Dutch origin, which every year at its two centers in Padua and Canaro Riviera supports around 400 blind and visually impaired children from all over Italy. My presentation is divided into three parts: thoughts, experiences, and questions. As regards the thoughts, we must first define what we mean by editability. Elena Corniglia says that editability does not coincide with affordability, it rather has a great deal to do with accessibility. This is because if a book is accessible in terms of content, perhaps because it's written in Braille, but it's not affordable and cannot be found, it is effectively as if it were not accessible. We therefore provisionally define editability as the propensity of some books to be reproduced in larger print runs with a price-quality ratio that allows them to reach the hands of all children. To define editability, we have therefore decided to compare different personal, professional, and institutional perspectives, conducting interviews with representatives from institutions, publishing houses, universities, libraries, and so on. We currently think of editability as a train running on two equally important rails. One rail consists of the books, which, even if they are less easily reproduced, even if they are very expensive, have nevertheless helped the concept of the tactile book to evolve. These are therefore extremely important books, and the authors of these books must be free to create them without worrying about costs or anything else. The other rail is represented by the books that are better suited to being reproduced in larger print runs to reach children's hands. We have realized that the fundamental question is this. When it comes to creating a book, when should we think about editability? We can think about it after, during, or even before. Sometimes actually, very often we think about the editability after, so we frequently take existing visual books from the market and adapt them into tactile books. Are there any benefits for children with visual impairments? Of course, there are some. The children can read the most popular books, the ones their peers read too, though these are potentially unusually expensive books. Sometimes books are published specifically as tactile books, perhaps adapted, so children with visual impairments can read books designed for them too, and this is an advantage, but these books are usually expensive as well. We might therefore ask ourselves whether it's possible to move from an unintentional editability to an intentional editability. This is because if the idea of editability comes after the book has been created, it is an unintentional, random, optional aspect of the book. It may happen that the author produces a more editable book, perhaps because they intend it for or design it for younger children, but they would not know how to make another one. And if a publisher simply selects a book because it is the most editable and publishes it, they are doing a wonderful thing, but it's still a market-driven operation. Laura Cattabianchi, who's an author of tactile books, says that by doing so, one is content with what is there, and the thought is not stimulated. For Laura Cattabianchi, editability could instead be an unintentional, fundamental aspect of the book. By doing so, one would be carrying out a cultural rather than a market-driven operation. And to achieve this, however, one must consider editability during and before the creation of the book. This is exactly what happened with the book Dalla finestra, from the window. It is a book in which the author and the publisher made decisions together. Costs were calculated from the beginning. They agreed on the number of the pages and the production processes. And the result was a wonderful book that also won the New Horizon Prize of the Bologna Ragazzi Awards 2025. This book that cost €50 to produce and is available from Tipiche Edizioni is also available in other bookshops and online shops. So it's a book that people can try out and can read, can find, and that's incredibly important. But one can also think about editability before. The Robert Ollman Foundation would like us to think about this even earlier. In a month's time, the Tocca a Te competition will be held in Italy to select the 5 best books to send to the Tiflo and Tactus competition. Among the various awards, there is also a special mention for an editable book. This is the book that is conceived by the artist who freely accepts the challenge of editability with a view to the competition will be awarded. So we have shared some tips for editability with the artists, which they can choose to consider if they wish to compete for the Editability Award. These tips for editability emerged from the interviews that I mentioned before and have been shared with the authors wishing to compete for these awards. These tips relate to general issues such as the number of pages, whether the book is made of paper or fabric, and whether it is a standard or a special format. As you can see, these are questions that the author can ask themselves, freely of course, whilst also weighting up various considerations. So if you make this choice, you can be aware that there are these considerations to make regarding editability. Other tips concern tactile illustrations, such as the techniques used to create reliefs, thicknesses, readily available materials, the number of shapes, how they are cut, how they should be glued, and above all, a general assessment. Every single piece. Is it necessary for aesthetic, narrative, and tactile purposes? We could ask ourselves. So, in the end, we realized that every possible solution depends on the active creative involvement of a great number of professionals and non-professionals alike, and on their willingness to mediate. As for the experiences, I'd like to share with you two projects in which the Robert Altman Foundation conceived and implemented editability, the pilot project Una casa per Fiammetta and the research project Mi Sento. As regards the project Una casa per Fiammetta, Home for Fiammetta, this is a book that won the 6th Tocca a Te competition in 2021 and the Editability Award in 2022. This book was deemed editable with some modifications to the layout. For example, as you can see, the book is no longer square but rectangular to optimize the press sheets and reduce paper waste. Some modifications to the number, the structure and texture of the tactile elements. So you see one house, not two, four windows, not six, in the new book we published, and modifications to the materials and production processes. The cook is not made of sewn fabric, it is made of laser cut wood. This is our editability group, and in the end, this book cost 56 euros excluding professional and labor costs. After all, a print run of 200 copies doesn't allow for economies of scale. However, Fiammetta's journey towards editability has continued. Nonetheless, the 200 copies produced by the Robert Altman Foundation were donated to hospitals, rehabilitation centers, and libraries. And Punti di Vista, who produced this book with us, has created an even simpler version that is available to buy for 32 euros, and for us, this represents a major milestone. The research project Mi Sento, I feel, is a project on editability but also on participatory design because we involved three groups of children, a group of blind children, a group of visually impaired children, and a class with the aim of reading, modifying, adding to some elements, publishing in large numbers, and donating the Mi Sento book. This was done in collaboration with a multi-professional team, including experts from the Robert Altman Foundation and teachers. In the end, the book will be made editable, so its production will take into account the children's suggestions as well as the aspects of editability. This book will also be donated to hospitals, rehabilitation centers, and libraries thanks to the non-profit organization Fiori Blu, Friends of the Robert Altman Foundation. It will not be just a tactile book, but also a flex picture ebook. A flex picture ebook is a book for children with low vision, but also for the children with different abilities. And it would be lovely to be able to talk a little more about this.
The Flex Picture ebook project is an interesting new concept, which I hope to tell more about another occasion. Other issue emerged from the interviews, which I have summarized in a few questions. Thank you for your attention. Here are my contact details.
So thank you, Enrica. Thank you very much. I think no doubt you'll get questions about the co-design you have planned now. So let's go to the next speaker, which is a very different approach and a very different topic. It's educational tactile images, so you need them with your study. And so Julian has started a working group with other resource centers to see if they can share the documents, if on the one hand can reduce costs and at the same time, on the other hand, realize quicker availability of high quality images. The rest will be told by Julian.
Thank you, Doreen. I'll quickly share my screen so you can hopefully follow along with the slides. Somebody could confirm they can see the PowerPoint because I can't see you anymore.
Yes.
Great. Okay, my name is Julian Nauta, and as Doreen said, I work as a product manager for Braille tactile images and Braille music at Dedicon in the Netherlands. And before Doreen retired, we used to be colleagues, and I took over a large share of the work that she used to do here. And today I'm talking to you about the International Working Group for Tactile Images, which was an initiative that we started after the Tactile Reading Conference last year. And it's an initiative by producers of tactile images in several countries, mostly Europe and Northern America, to share more knowledge, standardize, and also share production files. And the why of this is that, as many of you will know, tactile images are very resource intensive to make. As Enrica also showed you in her presentation, making tactile images based on original or existing books is a very specialist job. It takes a lot of time. And this, combined with an increasingly visual world, which just has many more images to adapt, means we, as single producers, never have enough resources or time to keep up. But we all have the same goal: make as many images accessible as we can. And last year at Tactile Reading, I spoke to a lot of people who had the similar desire to overcome these problems by sharing and working together more than we do now. And this is why we, at the beginning of this year, started a working group. I reached out to a lot of different producers worldwide and eventually started with 6. So that is Stadpet in Norway, NTM and SPSM from Sweden, the American Printing House and the National Library Service in America, and then of course Dedicon in the Netherlands. And I want to stress that this is just the beginning. So this is sort of the core working group of the first companies to put their hands up and join. Right now we're sort of finding our footing and a way of working, after which we'll of course open the group up to more countries, more organizations that would like to join in working together. So what do we actually do? So far, we've been going for about a month and a half. We've had 2 meetings, and we started very basically with sharing knowledge and our best practices for producing tactile images. On screen right now is a sort of demo file from Dedicon, which highlights which types of tactile lines, tactile symbols, textures work well on swell paper in our experience. So we've been sharing this. The other organizations have also been sharing what they do and why they do it. Besides that, we're also sharing what we've made so far to see, can we actually adapt and use each other's images, and how would we fit that into future production so we can share these files amongst one another. And our future goal, of course, then is to find some common ground, to maybe standardize where possible, so we draw images in a similar way, so we could at least print them in the other locations, but maybe also in a way that they don't feel that different to what clients from the different organizations receive now. So you can't really tell if it was made in-house or if it came from a different organization in a different country, and just the Braille on the image was changed. We're also running into questions about how do we share them, where do we share them, what platform do we use, and also some issues with copyright, because of course we're sharing images based on original books, and the Marrakesh Treaty thankfully solves a lot of those issues, but we're still looking into a few other ones. And yeah, the end goal is just to have more images available faster for our clients, which would mean that, for example, somebody in America wants several images from different cathedrals in Europe. I have a few on the slide here: the Notre Dame in Paris, the Basilius Cathedral in Moscow, or the Cathedral of Florence in Italy. We have those images. Why not share them, change the Braille on it so it matches the Braille code for that country? You don't have to do anything else. You can just supply them to whoever wanted those images. And that's really what we want to do with, at first, these 6 organizations, but in future, hopefully many more, so we can share a lot more. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation, Julian. Again, I think there will be a lot of questions, and of course it's a great idea to work primarily with images where there is no copyright, so the things that we have designed ourselves, and we already have quite a collection available. So then the last speaker, Enrica, thinks that her English is not good enough to present her thoughts within the time given, and her stand-in was not available, so I will stand in for her and do the presentation, but is here to answer your questions afterwards. So welcome, Hoëlle. For people who don't know her and who cannot see her, Hoëlle is blind. She is, I would say, the authority in the field of tactile images in France, and I will introduce her a little bit more during the presentation. Now, her talk focuses on adult readers and on chances for international collaboration. Next slide, please. So Hoëlle is, like me, retired. She started DUCTA, a foundation with the goal to promote the accessibility and availability of high-quality tactile images. I put the URL of her website here, and you can read it in translation. Of course, it's a French website. She worked for over 35 years in what's called now the I can't speak 2 languages at the time, Universience, used to call, in Paris. And she worked in close collaboration with the Louvre and other museums also to organize workshops for blind people and all others involved in how to read tactile images. So she is the founder of DUCTA, and I read one phrase from this website. She is always looking for ways to replace fake notions and poor mental representations that she doesn't consider to be fair and complete, with appropriate knowledge and understanding at the level of the cognitive and tactile capacity of visually impaired people. A difficult phrase, but remember it. Okay, next slide. Activities are still organizing workshops for blind readers all over France, collaborating with many museums, and she is advising publishers and designers on tactile books. You'll see some examples later. The publications are prepared for international distribution, as there is no braille in the tactile images. There is a QR code that leads to the information that's necessary. So on the one side, about the work of art or the other object, and on the other hand, to guide the fingers. So, you know, I'm in the right place. Another activity, now she is setting up a project on art history. There are already more than 300 works of art described, selected. Some of them are already in proof drawings. You will see them. It's transcultural, so it has works of art from all over the world worked in themes. It's very interesting. And you see the URL below. Okay, next. There are some options ready for collaboration right at this moment. There are still a lot of copies available of Olymp Touch, and I put a name underneath of the person who's also on the cover of the book. I will show it later, that you can approach if you have questions, but also, of course, Hoëlle. And there is Da Vinci Touch and many other books. The characteristics are that they are of a very high quality. The readability is great. There is a very big tactile resolution and it's on paper and it's really a pleasure for the fingers. And also the understandability is fine, and that is what she teaches in the workshops. And orthogonal projections, so projections under a straight angle, are the basis of this. And I did a presentation on that, so you can look it back if you want to. So they are ready for collaboration. There are even English texts available, and the images that are available have an international interest. Next. I'll show you, just to give you a quick impression, some examples. This is the rider on horseback from Olympe Touch. So you see it's embossed on paper, high relief. As I said, a feast for the fingers, much attention to discernibility and readability. And what also makes this very apt for international cooperation, for sharing, the more prints you make, the lower the cost per piece. And as I said, there are already English texts. You find the URL below. So show a detail, please. Tick. Yeah, there we see a detail, and here you can see how well everything is worked out, and also with tactile perception in the first place. So you can see that especially when you look at, for example, the hands. This is not so much visually very, I would say, correct, but it's, if you feel it, you feel a hand holding the lines of the horse. Next slide. Sorry, I forgot to say, there was a woman at a tactile reading. Hoëlle gave a workshop there. And can you go one back, Danielle? And she said, again, she said, she was blind too. And she said, well, this is the first time I never understand how the bit of the horse is in the mouth of the horse. And this is the first time I felt and understood. She was a very good tactile reader, by the way. But this was, yeah, I wanted to share that. Okay. So here you see the cover of the book. It's not really a book, it's loose sheets with numbers. Next. And it contains 12 images of the different Olympic sports. Here you see gymnastics, all the attitudes of the human body that are not so easily captured, seen by blind people. We now look at plate 11. It's a plate of boccia. It's also an Olympic game for the Paralympics. You must read the book to know all the rules and how it works. It would take too long to describe. Next, please. And also goalball, which I assume you see the 6 different postures and the text explains it, everything. So then, next slide. I said there are books like Da Vinci Touch. This specific book was made with an exhibition in 2013. And you see on the slide one of the tactile images and the large print book that comes with it. So this is also a book which is not bound, it's loose sheets. It has audio. This does not yet have the QR code, and text and high contrast images. Next, please. And here you see a detail of one of the chariots, and the next slide you see an impression of the real thing. So this exhibition was about all the great inventions of Da Vinci. Here you see the exhibition, and you see that in the displays the same images were used. Okay, then we go to the project I told about. This is the projet. These are proofs. Here we look at an Egyptian couple. It's the inspector of the scribes. It is a sculpture, and on the sides of the sculpture of the 2 people, there are hieroglyphs shown, and the blank square upper right, of course, is meant to put the QR code. As I said, it's a proof. Next. The Lover's Plate, it's from the Ottoman Empire, and you see how very beautifully detailed all this is worked out. For the people who cannot see it, we see a couple, the woman playing an instrument, a string instrument, and the man is kind of unbuttoning his vest or something. So the lover's plate. Okay, there we go. Next. The technique is very suitable for this type of images too. It's a painting of, it's called Eyes Closed, and we see busts of a woman with eyes closed emerging from the water. Okay, next. And this is a little bit similar. It's from Matisse. It's a painting of a sleeping woman. She's laying on her belly. It's almost serene in this form. And then the final one, this is the spirit of the servant. She is emerging from a pit. That is a kind of damaged barrel with wine leaves around. And from her mouth, you see some circling figures, which is like breath that's condensing in the air. Her body consists of rings, and there is a plate with Japanese characters in the background, and you can actually feel them. So this was to give you an impression of what I am talking about. It would be better to let you feel the things, but that is not possible. So what we would like to have is an international organization for collaboration on publications, for cost reduction. If we can print larger numbers, it's not expensive anymore. An organization that does the promotion and makes these publications known, because many people are not aware that this even exists. Also, formation should be taken up, educating blind people and everybody involved in how to make these and how to read and how to work with these tactile images, the communication, and also the distribution. Such an organization could lead to affordability, findability, and availability. So I'll keep it very short, because now you can contact Hoëlle if you want to know more about all these possibilities. And it's really necessary that we have such an organization, because a handful of people that are in the team of Hoëlle now is not enough. We don't have the power to make it known, to organize all this. So I hope that we can find such an organization. Okay. Well, do you want to add one thing?
No, because Doreen, you have said all the informations, and thank you very, very much, Doreen. And I hope somebody will contact me for more informations. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. And thank you, Hoëlle. Now I have to find another hat again, because from presenting now I will be hosting again. It's time for questions and answers. Who has a question to which of the speakers? So maybe I should wrap up a little. So first we had Enrica, who spoke of designing with editability in mind for children's books, and she stressed on the one hand the importance of the very expensive, but in fact milestones showing the way how to make tactile images, and at the same time for finding ways to make these beautiful books actually find the fingers of the blind children. And in the end she showed the Flex ebook with a tactile book. She wants to co-design, in fact, with children. So I was expecting the whole Georgia Tech now jumping up.
I'm sorry, my video dropped off just for the last 2 minutes, but I love this idea of co-design and would love to circle back around that. And I also really appreciated the identification of resources and also capacities that you're looking for within an organization. And especially as we're trying to form and define what the Tactile Media Alliance should be, I think that those were really helpful.
Okay, so I have a question too for you, Enrica. I'm very curious to what the children came up with in the last project. What suggestions did they have?
I speak in Italian, so
There will be the interpreting following.
allora i bambini hanno potuto modificare il testo e le immagini. È un libro che parla di emozioni e le emozioni non rappresentate dalla mimica del viso, ma le emozioni che sentiamo nel corpo. Questo accomuna tutti, chi vede e chi non vede.
So actually the children could edit both the text and the images, and the book Mi Sento is about the emotions that are not represented by just the mimic of the face, but within ourselves. These are interior emotions we feel, and therefore this collects both blind and non-blind, non-visually impaired people.
In questo libro le autrici ci hanno lasciato il permesso di cambiare tutto. E quindi i bambini hanno per esempio modificato le situazioni che provano le emozioni, perché i bambini ciechi non vivono tutte le esperienze che vivono i bambini vedenti.
Yes, the authors allowed us to change all the contents in the book. So children chose to change and edit the situations because blind children live different situations and experience these emotions in different situations compared to non-visually impaired children.
Ad esempio c'era una scheda in cui il bambino era al suo compleanno e diceva io sono al 7° cielo, e c'era un'immagine con le nuvolette, sono eccitato, ok? Ma l'eccitazione non concordava con questa immagine calma e quindi loro hanno cambiato l'emozione corporea, io salto come una molla.
For instance, there was one situation in which it was the child's birthday, and the child said, I'm in seventh heaven, and there were the clouds represented in the image, but this didn't correspond to the calm image of the book. So the blind children decided to change the image completely and say that when I'm happy, because it's my birthday, I jump like a spring.
Il design partecipativo a me piace molto, lo stiamo realizzando e ci sta molto lavorando anche la professoressa Danielle Valente dell'Università di Lyon 2.
Actually, I like this co-design very much. We are all working very much on this. And also Professor Daniele Valente from the University of Lyon 2 is working very much on that.
And is the book still, so to speak, inclusive? Is it okay for blind and for sighted children? Did the sighted children like it?
Yes, actually the research demonstrates and shows that the most important aspect for children is to have these tactile images, these material images. These are more expensive and they take more time, but they are necessary to them.
Mm-hmm.
I have a quick follow-up question to this. I think that it's really thinking about these templates or thinking about the editability and the adaptability. I think one of the questions I have is how can we support the students, the readers, becoming reflective about why they like different decisions or why they like different features, or if they want to have something more rougher, for example, or if they want the text to be different. I think capturing the reasons why those children want those differences might be really useful, especially if we're thinking about creating data sets or ways that we might ultimately kind of use this and see patterns within readers' preferences. And I'm curious if you've thought about that.
Allora, noi abbiamo visto che parlando con i bambini emergono tanti vissuti e a volte coincidono con i vedenti, i non vedenti, gli ipovedenti, altre volte no. E se noi andiamo sul corpo, ecco, il corpo accomuna tutti, ma i vissuti sono diversi. Ad esempio, quando un bambino mi fa bu, mi fa spavento, un bambino vedente corre, scappa, il bambino cieco si ferma, si blocca. Abbiamo privilegiato la reazione del bambino non vedente rispetto a quella del vedente. altre volte abbiamo fatto il contrario e comunque abbiamo cercato le esperienze che accomunassero tutti.
Yeah, actually, we tried to work with the children on the different experiences because sometimes the experiences are the same or are quite similar for both blind, visually impaired, or sighted children. Sometimes they are not. For the body, we're quite similar, whereas for the experiences, this is not always the case. For instance, when you scare sighted child, this child runs away. Whereas when you scare a blind child, this child stops. So the reactions may be similar between blind and sighted children. Sometimes they don't have the same reaction. So we try to focus on their experiences. Sometimes we included some experiences that are more relevant and some reactions that are more relevant to blind children. Sometimes some reactions that refer more to sighted children, but we always focus on the experiences.
I have a similar question. As you said, the original books are way too expensive to reproduce, but they are often very beautiful. And you showed some examples where simplifications were made. Could you check that out, or didn't the children miss the original? I see you laughing, you understand. Yes.
Sì, allora Fiammetta non l'abbiamo rivisto con i bambini, per cui abbiamo rimpianto solo noi, d'accordo? Ecco.
Ok.
Però, per esempio, è stata successa una cosa molto bella. Un papà cieco mi ha raccontato che lui voleva leggere un libro a suo figlio, vedente, piccolo, e non aveva libri, e ha letto proprio la versione di 32 euro di Una casa per Fiammetta. Allora, forse non è il libro bello come l'originale, ma poter dare a un papà l'opportunità, cieco, l'opportunità di leggere un libro con il proprio bambino vedente, posso rimpiangere l'originale, ma mi passa.
So actually, Fiammetta wasn't revised together with the children. So actually, we are the only ones regretting the choices we made. But I could refer to one example because there was one blind dad who told me that he didn't have any books to read with his sighted child, and he didn't find any books to read with him. And actually, he found then the 32 euro version of A Home for Fiammetta to read to him. So I could say that this book may not be the most beautiful one, but it gave the opportunity to this blind dad to read a book to this sighted child. So actually, there are no regrets, I would say.
I'm sorry, I see we only have 9 minutes left, and I think that the other presenters should have some questions too.
I do see that there's a comment saying I realized today is focused on tactile media, but in my research on scented books, I've come across their use with the blind communities in the 70s and 80s. Have you ever experimented with scratch and sniff or thought of its standardization in tactile books?
I can remember that I once were in a museum where you could scratch and sniff a painting, which was very exciting. This is also a question for Enrica, I think. Or does Julian have to say something here?
Maybe not from personal experience, but I do remember Doreen at the city fair in Frankfurt. We met somebody from Spain who had a scented color code for painting. So every color would have a certain smell, and you could make images and paintings with those colors, which then sort of allowed you to read very roughly the image based on smell and a combination of smells. So that's maybe interesting for you, Jess.
So not very long ago, I made a tactile book myself. This is really a topic for a whole evening. And I added scent, and now the whole book scents. After the flowers, I sent it. Smells. The more senses, the better learning process is, and the better you take up everything, the better you remember. So it's a very valuable addition if it's working.
I'll just kind of chime in here and say that, Julian, I really appreciated how you're talking about forming these collaborations and trying to find kind of strategic new pathways for optimizing, it's not just about repositories, right? It's really about how do we make the content in that repositories approachable, or, is kind of what we heard Enrica say as well. And so I just wanted to kind of lift that up and thinking about how do we actually also store some of that tacit knowledge that's being developed as you're working out, looking at the different examples and looking at differences in styles and coming up with standards. How do we actually capture some of that annotation and that tacit knowledge that's being developed in these working rooms?
Yeah, exactly. We're still also working that out. So we're really in the stage of sharing and reading what everybody has to share. And it's really interesting because there are not a lot of real scientific papers that are validated on which tactile lines you should use for a swell paper image, for example. It's a lot of just experience by doing and developing and receiving feedback over the years from these different organizations. And it's really interesting to see how that developed in these different places and what the similarities can be.
Also, recently there was a project on maps, Julian.
I think you mean
within a certain scale and type of images, the symbols were standardized.
So that's a project that we did in the Netherlands with the land measuring agency. So they have all of the geographic data of the Netherlands, but also have a lot of maps of the world. And we used their data together with a geographic information system, GIS, to sort of make automatic tactile maps based on this data. So you basically tell the system to generate different roads, buildings, waterways in certain styles, and you can sort of automate making tactile maps. And for that, of course, you need to standardize. So there was a slightly larger test done to come up with what are the lines and tactile symbols with the highest probability of correctness in identifying them, which was really interesting. Is also something that we're sharing.
It'd be very interesting to, at some point, or maybe we could talk after and I can share additional notes to talk about kind of the difference between that and the TMA project based out of San Francisco. Just as a matter of time, I also just want to acknowledge Hoëlle's presentation and just the intricate detail of the tactile graphics that you showed. And when we're really looking at high fidelity decision making and just that clarity of materiality and the bas relief sculpture. I was thinking about one of the graphics where you can just see the knees kind of poking through the dress. I just really want to speak to the quality of those graphics and celebrate that work. So thank you. And since we have 2 minutes left, I also want to open up this conversation around, is there anybody that would want to be part of a working group that really is tackling this conversation, thinking more about how do we support sharing of resources and fostering editability competitions? I'm thinking about, well, how could the Tactile Media Alliance student design competition start to pull in some of these requirements? We would like to kick something off. If anybody who is interested wouldn't mind just putting a thumbs up or reaction so we know who we could follow up with, that would be wonderful. We'll make sure that we get those and send an email to connect you all. Without further ado, I think we can just thank our speakers. Thanks, Doreen, for organizing this. And then just Doreen has also agreed to help kind of curate another session on September 3rd. And this is going to be a continuation, but also a deepening of the conversation on finding kind of common reference points. Doreen, if you want to give the title, that would be helpful.
Yeah, it's about orthogonal projection as a common standard for understandability of 3D objects in tactile images. And I've given a lecture on that already. So on the one hand, I have readability, that is, can I discern everything? And that differs per technique. On the other side, you have understandability. And per domain, you have to determine standards for that or common lines for that. So that is on the 3rd of September.
And then stay tuned for the speaker who's coming next month on the 3rd Thursday. So thanks all for being here, and we look forward to seeing you again.